He's a husband, father, grandfather, senior pastor, entrepreneur, author, talk show host, and one of today's most respected thought leaders. He is TD Jakes. TD, thanks again for another opportunity to
It's
sit
a
and
real
talk with
pleasure
you.
to be with you, Chris.
I enjoy it every time we get an opportunity to do this.
Thank you.
I mean, now you may notice in that intro, I wanted to be careful to make sure that we separated you as an individual from your areas of responsibility. You often talk about how we in society make that mistake of not being able to separate the actual gift from the individual.
Absolutely.
That being said, tell us, who is TD Jakes?
That's a very interesting thing. I think you spend your whole life discovering that. I think at my core, I am a communicator, a thinker, a lover of people, somebody who really tries, if I can't help you, I don't bother you. You know, and I consider myself a very simple person, but my life is quite complicated. It's got many tentacles to it, and I have varied interests and multidimensional in terms of my focus and aspirations.
Yes. I've heard you say before that your destiny is to help others reach theirs. Unpack that a little bit more.
You know, I realized that I wasn't so important. I'm just a tool in the hands of God to help those that are important.
Yes.
And in the process, I've spent all of my life trying to uplift people. And in the process of uplifting them, it has helped me to be lifted. And I wrote a book called Destiny because I realized that my life was orchestrated by God. I can see it now.
Yes.
I believe that all of our lives are orchestrated by God. I think that the more we line up with His plan rather than developing our own plan and trying to get God to bless it, we would be far more effective. I wrote the book to challenge people to better understand that there is a magnet that draws us, a compass that pulls us, a power that helps us to align with where we really ought to be in life.
Yes. You started to talk about the book. Let's dig into it a little bit.
Okay.
But before we get into the inside of this book, I want to take note of the outside. You've written over some 25 books, many of those New York Times bestsellers. You've been on the cover of a few of those books. But as I look at the cover of this book and look into the eyes of the guy on the cover of this book, I can't help but think that this is a guy at this time, in this space, who feels that with the help of God, he truly is walking out his destiny. This is a guy whose sky is a little bit bluer, whose water is a bit more wet. You tell me if I'm reading too much into it.
No,
Sure.
I'm amazed that you saw that much in it. But that's true. I think I'm a different person. I've learned a lot. I've been exposed to a lot. Wow, I've been around the world and touched people that from people on death row to the inauguration of several presidents.
Yes.
You can't have those moments and not be changed by them. You know, I spent many of the hours that I write about in the book with Mrs. King, listening at her tell her story.
Yes.
Looking at pictures that have never been released and hearing her talk about the force of the bombs that knocked them back into the kitchen and what that felt like. Those are gifts.
Man.
You know?
Yes.
And so the eyes that you see staring back at you out of that book are eyes who have met witch doctors in Ghana, who have been up in the hills of West Virginia with snake handlers, who have been the guest of kings and princes around the world, literally, and learned some things that I want to put in the hands of people who may not have those experiences. Who may not be in the back room before Whitney Houston's funeral and see the atmosphere in the room, or at the National Cathedral with the president and the vice president in the middle of a national tragedy.
Yes.
It is not the moment that I can give you, but the wisdom that is extracted from those moments, I can print into that book and share it with you. Your story may not be my story, but it may help to facilitate your story. This book and the thoughts therein is designed to be the wind beneath your wings.
Yeah.
I have nothing to prove now. I'm a grandfather, you know. I'm at the stage in my life where if I haven't done anything by now, I'm not going to do it. But with the strength and the power that I have left, I want to make it easier for those that are coming next, or in the middle of their stride, or have fallen off their horse,
Yes.
to get back up again.
I certainly see it as that. After reviewing this book, I see this as a manual, if you will, a set of instructions to truly help us step into our purpose. So thank you for writing the book.
My pleasure.
It's almost like you've been looking at my notes. You talked about that opportunity that evening, this afternoon with Mrs. Coretta Scott King. I want to go back to that because you cover that in such detail. I mean, obviously this was several years ago, but you cover it with so much detail as if it happened yesterday. You talk about the fact that you asked her a question and her response to that question took your breath away.
Yeah.
Share with us the question and what transpired afterwards.
I wondered why she never married again. You know, she was a fairly young woman when Martin died, and I thought it was amazing that she never married, and as far as we know, as far as I know, never really dated again. She said that it was her destiny to play that role, to be his wife. She said that Dr. King was a tough act to follow, and I certainly concur with that. You know, how do you come behind? And that she accepted that as her assignment in life. She knew clearly what she was here to do and to be in a way that I think few people do. Can you imagine the seduction of being Mrs. King and to have that King name, to take it and exploit it in some way or use it in some way? And yet she remained classy all the days of her life because she knew who she was.
Yes.
And I wrote about it with passion. Mrs. King was a schoolmate with my mother. So they both went to Lincoln High School together in Marion, Alabama.
Yes.
And I grew up listening at my mother talking about, as my mother would say, how Coretta could sing. And she had a beautiful voice, you know. And so we had the same memories. She knew all of my aunts. She knew where my grandmother lived. We had so many memories together. And as a child of an Alabama woman, to sit with a woman who was born in Alabama and share some of those memories and collect some of those memoirs, I wrote about them to share them with people who deeply need to appreciate that all of us have something to do that may be hard and painful. But if you know who you are and you know whose you are, you can not only do it, but you can do it with the grace and dignity that stops you from searching for other assignments because you're comfortable in your own skin.
Man. Yeah, and you talked about that, how she could have done a number of things. In the book, you detailed that out. You shared things with me that I didn't know about her.
Right.
You know, so that's the way you unpacked that was just so profound, and the way that you just remembered every detail of that. And I said that, and you talked to her earlier about how you've traveled all over the world. You've sat with presidents and kings. The first thing out of the book is that afternoon with Mrs. Coretta Scott King.
Yeah, I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
I learned so much talking with her. I learned so much about people by watching how the world handled her, watching how our community handled and sometimes mishandled her. I learned the cost of being a hero, how much it costs in a personal way, your personal expense, how people can idolize you and at the same time ignore you.
Yes.
It's shocking how you can be well thought of and still be neglected. The oxymorons of success. It was something I'll never forget. You know, it was a schoolmaster moment. Yeah, it was a tutorial. Yeah, that and meeting with Rosa Parks. I can still feel Rosa Parks' hands on my head. As she patted my head. She was in a wheelchair out in front of a little place she was staying in, an apartment in Detroit. I can still feel the touch of her fingers on my head and the words that she spoke in my ear, and how blessed I was to fondle history, to be touched by somebody who stood for something.
Yeah.
It was
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you give us those type of moments in great detail in here. This book is on the heels of your New York Times bestselling book, Instinct.
Yeah.
I love how you lay out the fact that instinct is how we are wired, but destiny reveals why we're wired the way that we are.
Exactly.
Talk about that some more.
You know, if I wire a lamp and do it exactly right until I find the plug, it will never shine. And we do all of these things for self-development, and that's what Instinct was about, finding who you are at your core and finding out your gifts and talents. But if you don't find the plug, you'll never shine. Destiny shows you how to be grounded into a place where you fit, how to resist the urge to run, because we are such runners. And sometimes we run from our own destiny. I cannot tell you how many times, Chris, God had something for me that I didn't choose for myself. The moments in my life that I thought I was too small to stand that tall. Opportunities that came to me that scared me to death and yet allured me like something you would not believe. I'm in the middle of one now. Yeah. And that allurement and that intimidation cohabitate in the same room. They're roommates together. And so you can be drawn towards something and yet be horrified by it. Yes. And so I begin to talk to people about that, what goes on inside of people who are drawn toward destiny. And I'm already excited. There's so many people. There's already a great buzz about the book. The book is already being pre-ordered everywhere. And it's exciting to see that I can have that kind of conversation with people that I may never get to meet.
Yes. Chapter 3 certainly resonated with me. You talk about how we can want to hasten the process to destiny and how we try to avoid the steps.
You know, I did that mostly for millennials, but it applies to all of us.
Yes.
I think that a lot of times young people are attracted to the goal. They're attracted to the trophy, but don't want to run the relay.
Yeah.
They want the commendation, but they don't want to put in the sweat. And it sounds like a criticism, but it's more of a critique, as it were, because the real gift is never the trophy. You'll leave it on the mantle and forget it was there. The real gift is what you learned while you were running the laps.
Yes.
It is the process. And so when I start talking about destiny steps and stepping into your future, everybody's excited about getting to the future, but what I'm excited about is the steps along the way. Yeah. That you could never take away from me. You could steal my trophy.
Right.
You know, you could just OJ had his trophies taken, but you could never take away what he learned while he was on the field. Those things nobody can ever take from you. Those moments in your life where you scuffled and struggled and had to pull yourself up, that's the real treasure of life. And you see how I'm getting passionate about it?
Yeah.
But
it's really good stuff. We like it.
Yeah.
More.
It's really important that we are not so goal-oriented that we ignore process, because the process brings its own gift. And I found that if you give people the results before they had the process, they'll end up losing it.
Yes.
What gives you the ability to maintain it is building it yourself.
Yes.
And so I have a strong conviction about due process. I don't believe that it is important what you give to your children as much as what you leave in your children.
Man.
If you give more to them than you gave in them, they will waste everything you left to them.
That's good. You talked about that whole thing of respecting the steps and establishing order. And one of the things you mentioned is when your life is ordered, setbacks and disappointments are regarded as commas and not periods.
Absolutely.
That'll preach on a Sunday morning at 10 o'clock.
Yeah. It is. I learned more in the setback than I did on the freeway.
Yeah.
You know, I did. I learned so much at the breaking points, at the giving up moments, at the moments that I literally thought I would die, but I didn't.
Yes.
I really thought this was the big one. You know, friends, this is the big one, but it wasn't.
Yes.
And having crossed to the other side of it, it gave me far more than it took from me. Yeah. It really, really did. My strength is built on my struggles. Man. Yeah. I can fight what's in front of me because of the things I fought behind me. I have to watch it because I will get happy right now
Yes.
and ruin the whole interview because that is the substratum of my belief system.
Yes, and you share so much of that in the book, and thank you so much for being so transparent and just sharing all that you shared. I mean, again, it truly is, I believe, a manual blueprint for us to step into our purpose. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Wow. To thine own self be true. To be true to yourself and true to your core and true to your values is my highest aspiration.
All right. TD Jakes, thank you so much.
Been a real pleasure.
Yes.